So microblogging site Twitter beat street estimates with better than expected user growth in its third quarter earnings. This comes as a huge shot in the arm for the microblogging site that has been battling sagging user growth over the past couple of quarters. Now, the company reported a 4% uptick in monthly active users, with the number crossing 330 million in the third quarter. This is a positive sign for investors who view the audience size as a measure of Twitter's long-term health. What's more, daily active users increased 14%. The fourth consecutive quarter of double-digit growth. So is this a sign of a turnaround for Twitter, or is this the rise? Is this rise in users per month just one tiny data set to draw any serious inference from? Is Twitter finally turning a corner? To discuss that, I'm joined by Selena Wang from Bloomberg News. Selena, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quinn. I want to start by asking you, I was going through your piece earlier, is this being seen as some sort of a turnaround for Twitter, considering the narrative has been that, well, Twitter's really been trying to play catch up with Facebook and the other social media platforms?
Well, investors are certainly reacting very strongly to this news. Shares are absolutely soaring right now, but there are definitely pockets of growth that were very evident in today's earnings. But the fundamental question is, does Twitter have a long-term driver to growth? And that question still hasn't been answered. MAU, monthly active users, did rise slightly more than expected, but overall revenue in the United States, which is their most important advertising market, declined more than 10%. So that pace has not improved. However, they are closer to reaching top line and bottom line growth, so that is a positive reaction that our investors are looking at right now.
Right, Selena. And also, I was going through the shareholder statement, and Jack Dorsey, the CEO at Twitter, actually said that the company has shifted focus to videos and live events as a way to spur audience growth. That sounds a lot like the Facebook way, isn't it?
It is. Everybody's trying to hop into this space, and Twitter's at a disadvantage here because they have a much smaller base of users. To put things into perspective, Twitter says it has about 330 monthly active users. Their daily active users is less than half of that, while Facebook has about 1.3 billion monthly active users. So this is something that Twitter is really going to have to struggle to catch up, but they want to become something that's much more than a niche platform, and they're hoping that they can attract those users and attract people outside of the existing Twitter sphere through video advertising, through live streaming events of news and sporting events where people can discuss what's happening in real time. So this is the strategy that both Jack Dorsey and their chief operating officer, Anthony Noto, have been talking about on end for the past several quarters.
Right, Selena, obviously that's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Twitter. They've also been, battling the trolls and harassment claims. And I think those are issues that Twitter's been facing for a long time now. Of course, earlier this week, we saw how they came up with the Transparency Center as well when it came to, well, especially political ads. That's something that Facebook's been dealing with as well. Do you think these are, things that Twitter's done to really turn things around and it's worked well for them?
That's right. They're in the midst of trying to gain users and advertisers. They're also struggling with this gigantic branding issue right now. They've struggled to deal with abusers and trolls on the platform since the very beginnings, and they've started to make some steps to address those in terms of being much more strict when there are people clearly harassing and trolling users on the platform. They're also currently being investigated by the U.S. Congress for Russian influence on the platform during the 2016 U.S. presidential elections, and they've responded very swiftly to those investigations. Earlier this week, we saw the creation of this transparency platform on Twitter where they will now disclose political ads, they'll disclose who is backing ad campaigns and how much they have spent. And also just earlier today, they announced that they are now banning Russia Today and Sputnik from advertising on their platform.
That's right, Selena, obviously, and there's also a congressional hearing where Twitter, Facebook, and Google will actually be, where their counsels will be going on November 1st. Another thing I wanted to ask you was that when it comes to daily active users, now that seemed to be a positive sign, and you were mentioning it earlier, but their daily active user growth was up 14% over last year. That's the fourth consecutive quarter of double-digit growth, but Twitter doesn't actually share the DAU number. Is that because, well, considering the major numbers, the massive numbers that come with Facebook and Snapchat, is that perhaps the reason why they don't disclose that number?
So the Securities and Exchange Commission actually brought this up to Twitter recently, saying daily active users are a very important metric that investors look at when they're valuing these types of social media companies. And what Twitter said was that we think the growth is more important than the base, and implied that by reporting the actual daily active user number, they would then attract unwanted comparisons to platforms like Facebook and Snapchat. Now, if you talk to Twitter, what they'll say in response is that everybody calculates DAU a little bit differently, so they don't think it's quite fair to have that apples to orange comparison. However, I think it's fair to say that by not reporting DAU, it's a fair assumption that they are not very strong numbers. All we know so far is that something around less than 50%, around 50% of MAU. And if you take that metric, it's far below Facebook's and actually below Snapchat's as well, which is not a great sign for investors since Snapchat is a much younger company.
Absolutely, Sunny, thanks so much for speaking with us. Well, the key takeaway is, although Twitter's numbers have beaten sales estimates, the fact of the matter is that there's a long way for Twitter on the road to recovery.